Okay, should be live.
Okay. Welcome to the 31st of January's release workgroup meeting. And we've got an agenda over on GitHub. It's Node.js release issue 411. The first one we've got on there is a v6.x backport, which is, I think it's for NAPI. It's from Gabriel. So maybe, Michael, you can comment on that one. Do you know why it was added to release agenda?
Yep, I'm just I'm just getting to the agenda so I can see.
Oh.
Give me 1 sec. A little bit distracted because we have some CI issues.
Yep.
Issues. Sorry, just navigating to the minutes there. Okay, so this one is environment 22633, right? I guess this was one from quite a while ago, and I guess it's on the agenda. Miles maybe added it to the agenda because well, actually, I'm just trying to see through the history.
No.
Release agenda. I see it. It may have been done a while ago, but
I believe it's on the agenda because this is targeted at 6, and we have no scheduled further release at 6. So the question is, are we taking this, for a potential either a specific 6 release, or, for example, if there was another security release, would we roll this out with it, or is it just too late for 6 to say, look, this is not going to happen? So one way or the other, we have to make a decision: is this going to go into 6 or not?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, the context around this is we unfortunately released something in master which broke our versioning scheme for NAPI. So basically something went out as part of NAPI, not guarded by the experimental flags.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you go to 8, 10, you actually get this feature because it was so as part of the contract from 1.3. So 6 is actually broken in the sense that even though it claims to have support for 1.3, it doesn't. And the reason we didn't just back it out in master is because it got it basically got sent out to previous releases. And so by the time, we kind of said what 1.3 was for sure, it was part of it, but it's not in 6. Now, I guess the mitigating factor is we haven't had anybody trip over that since then, because that was back in August last year. And when Node 6 goes LTS, well, then we wouldn't add something anyway. So this, it's really we're in a tough state that either we add it to 6, which brings us back into consistency, which is kind of what we were arguing for, or we leave it in a broken state. And if people come to us and say, well, why isn't this there? We don't have a good story or a good rationale for why it's not.
Okay. It's Sem for minor as well.
Yes. Well, that's because it was like, it got added today, it shouldn't be added unless they're marked as experimental. So this shouldn't happen again, but it did.
Yeah. I don't know what anyone else's gut feel on this one is. I know 6 has only got, about 3 months left.
Yeah.
Is it likely to cause problems for us if this doesn't go back into 6 while people migrate from 6 to 8?
It's not gonna affect migration. Like basically this is an addition, right? So if you're not using it now, when you migrate, it doesn't make any difference. It's more if you write your add-on and you're using 8 or 10 to validate it, and you say, okay, I'm good, and then you try and actually roll it out on 6, it's not going to work because it'll say, hey, this is a missing function.
So it's only if someone really was to be creating something on 8 or 10 now and wanting to roll it back to 6.
It's kind of like they would notice the problem if they're developing on 6, And they might come and say, you're missing a function. The doc says this function is there. Why isn't that function there, right?
Okay.
So if you're developing on the lowest one, you're actually going to notice it, and you'll either work around it or won't use it. If you work the other way and say, okay, I'm going to write my module and then say, well, this now should work because it's the same ABI across all the releases. Because we declare, there's nothing that says we can't add new functions in later versions, but we have a versioning scheme where we would bump a version number that says, okay, this now supports 1.4. So if you're using it, you can only use it on the versions that support 1.4.
Yeah.
And things like our pre-JIP story do try and, look at that. And if there's multiple versions, like you can build add-ons that support different versions of an API.
Mm-hmm.
And, it will try and pick the right binary based on which version you've targeted. So somebody could rightly say, well, I've targeted 1.3. I've got a single binary for that. I didn't need anything newer, but this function's missing, what's going on.
Okay.
If it wasn't so close to 6.x going out of service, I'd say we should definitely do it, but
Yeah, I feel like a Semver minor at this point in 6 might raise a few eyebrows. Like, it's quite late.
Yeah, it's like, I think from the having our NAPI story clean, it would be good to have. But again, because of the time that 6 has left, I have a harder time, saying we absolutely have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question here, it seems, is just that, like, is the work that it would take to release a Semver minor on 6 so close to it going out of service worth the benefit that we get from doing it? So, like,
yeah.
How much do we care about the consistency of our NAPI versioning and the way that that story seems to end users? Like, is it worth the effort? Because, like, it definitely would be some effort to release a Semver minor.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's important because we're, at the adoption phase where we don't want to turn people off and have them not have confidence that it's going to be stable and consistent. But it's been since August as well, right? So nobody has come and complained since then. So that's clearly an indicator that not too many people have run across or needed maybe this that this specific function isn't something that lots of people are using, so it doesn't get in their way, right?
Yeah. At that point, I'd kind of be inclined to not do a Semver minor on 6 just because it's not been reported, and in theory, people would only get the benefit of it for a couple more months in Node 6.
Yeah.
And by the time we actually do a Semver minor release, that could take like a week or two to arrange, right? To find the time to do it.
Yeah. I'm kind of like at the wait and see maybe. The only thing that bugs me a bit is at the back of my mind is that people may still try and support 6 later on, but I guess at that point we just say sorry, it was not, if we'd found it then, we definitely wouldn't do it. So
the only thing I would say is that there are commits in 6 staging which didn't go into the last commits of 6.
Sorry, that do what?
There are commits on 6 staging that haven't actually gone out in a release. So maybe we should, at some point, or maybe outside of this meeting, go through those commits and see if any of those warrant a release of 6. I mean, I would be doubtful, but that may be something worth doing, just to see if there's any reason to do a 6 release other than this NAPI issue.
That kind of goes in line with what Miles was saying in the last release meeting about maybe doing quarterly releases for releases that are in maintenance.
Yep.
So I guess we could look at that before we make a decision.
Yeah, like that. That's where it's like, if we were going to do a release, I'd want to argue this in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's reasonable.
Okay, so I guess I can write an action for that. Is we'll look at what's on v6.x staging and see if anything there is worth going into a new release and whether it's dangerous to go into a new release or anything like that, because obviously we don't want to break people at this point.
No, yeah, it's got to be a very safe.
So, yeah, we'll give a quick audit of what's on v6.x staging, and
I mean, if there's nobody calling for things, the answer is probably going to be no. But
okay, so yeah, I'm happy to go through that and maybe report back the next meeting.
Yep.
Okay. I guess we can move on to the next one, the next item on the agenda, which is plan for Node 11 releases. We seem to have a nice timetable going now. Did 11.9 go out yesterday? I think I saw it.
Yes.
I released 11.9 yesterday.
Okay.
There's still no one who volunteered for the next release in 2 weeks.
Okay.
I could probably do it if nobody steps up.
Okay. I think I might be signed up for the next 10, which kind of overlaps with that.
I could potentially then. So Michael, I can sync up with you later potentially, but yeah, I might be able to take that over.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll probably pick one of the 11s maybe later on in the month, but I guess I'll just make an effort to update this when I know my dates a bit better. Okay, I think we'll be covered for the next couple of releases. That's fine. How is the release schedule working in general with the amount of commits that are going into each release?
Well, with the last 2 releases, it was not really following the schedule, so I cannot really say. But I made a few releases on 10.x before it went to LTS, and I did them every 2 weeks, and it was always good in regard of the number of commits.
Yeah, it seems fine. We can always shift it by a week if something comes up. Cool. Okay. And then we've got doc update the releaser onboarding process and rules. So I think this is Rod's PR that's open in Node.js release. And I think it covers the point we raised last meeting about you have to promote a current before you do an LTS release. So I guess what just needs to happen here is get a few more reviews on it before it lands. I think that's probably why Miles put it on the agenda, just to draw our attention to it before. Has everyone seen this PR?
I have seen it. I can have a look after the meeting and approve it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give it another once over. I guess once we've got a few more reviews, we will go ahead. It's been open for a little while now. I don't think there's... Miles isn't here to say why he added to release, so I guess we'll move on. And last item on our agenda is update to reflect an API. So I guess, Michael, you're the best person to talk through this one.
Right. So we talked about this last week, and the suggestion was that I do a PR, which basically says tweaks the process for an API. So I just added into the text that says, once a release moves into maintenance mode, only critical bugs, security fixes, documentation updates, and updates to ensure consistent usability of the NAPI across LTS releases will be permitted. And then another section down below, it says, updates to ensure consistent usability of the NAP across LTS releases are allowed, as it is important to ensure that NAPI native modules can be used across LTS versions in order to support adoption. Okay. And that was sort of in support of our, the thoughts of, okay, we could do a quarterly release, but to make it explicit, one of the reasons why we would include fixes that might look like bug fixes or whatever that weren't as critical, but because of the consistency needs, we would do anyway.
Okay. Does any text in Node.js Node need to have the same content, or is all of this information release README?
I think it's release.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's where it belongs, because it's the release working group that kind of outlines the what goes in or doesn't go in.
Okay.
So I mean, I don't think there's any objections in the issue itself, and there's a number of approvals. So I think it's probably on the agenda just to make sure that the release team agrees, and it's probably ready to land if that is the case.
Yep. If there's no objections, we can land it after the meeting, I guess. Okay. And that's the last item on the agenda. What I will quickly hop to is the 10.x release schedule. And so I'm signed up to do the February release, which is due out on the 26th of February. And Miles is signed to do the December minor, which comes out at the beginning of April. There's also a plan for a Node 8 release at the end of March to pick up all of the open back ports, or the ones we deem necessary for this release before April. And the only other thing is we should probably start looking at Node 12 and cutting the branches for Node 12 and working through that. So I'll create an issue on release for that. And I think, was it James Snell raised a PR adding some instructions for what to do for major releases. So we'll start going through that.
Do we already know who will do the Node 12 release?
So James offered to mentor me for it, but I plan to make it all into docs. So if that's fine with everyone.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. I think one of them said that the branch is supposed to be cut 3 months before April. So I'll probably start looking at that today or tomorrow. Okay. Is there any other release business for anyone? No? Cool. So we finished pretty early. If there's nothing else to leave, I'll give you the time back. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.